Hi, it is Helen with So Kind of Wonderful, and this is another Butterfly Fields video, but this is our first one to talk about just the patchwork. So the patchwork is right here. Each butterfly has a different patchwork. You can see this one over here has another one. This is called the Churn block. And this is your first patchwork in your Butterfly Fields book. Here's the Butterfly Fields book. And in it, the way it's laid out is on page 9, well, let's see, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the instructions for making the curved parts of the butterfly and assembling it. But in order to make the patchwork is an easy method for sewing patchwork blocks. The patchwork is laid out. Each patchwork has its own page. So number 1 is Churn dash. So here's our first patchwork that we're making. And one thing to remember is that you'll be making 2 of the same. And depending on how it works out, sometimes they're mirrored and sometimes you just rotate it. So the first thing we have are 8 3-inch squares. Now, what's really great about everything, if you're making a half square triangle or a quarter square triangle, everything starts with a 3-inch square. So if you wanted to rotate or change things around, you could totally switch out colors easily. That was something that Jenny and I thought about and really thought that that would simplify it if everything just started with a 3-inch square. So the first step here, it walks you through very detailed. Layer 2 3-inch squares. So layer them right sides together. Doesn't actually say that. Okay, layer 2 3-inch squares. Draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of one of them. I'll use something dark here so you can see it. And we're marking, not yet. So draw a line. Now you're sewing on each side of that line that you have drawn. So and you're going to be a 1/4 inch from each side of that line. All right, here I have sewn a 1/4 inch on each side of the line. Now you will cut this, you will cut on the line that you drew. That will give you 2 half square triangles. And let's see, press seams open. So we're going to press seams open. This is a pretty small patchwork, so if we press seams open, it will flatten it out a bit. So I'm going to press seams open. There you can see I've pressed open. And now we're making a 2-inch square. So the patchwork finishes at 4.5. So to make a 2-inch, there's a couple ways you can do it. I wish I had a 2-inch square up. I do not. That's all right. We can still do this. So I have a diagonal line here on my Sew Square 4. I'm just putting that on the diagonal seam, and then I can see I can get 2 inches. If you're a really good sewer and you cut really well, you could actually come down here and use 2 sides that are already there, here and here. So this one sewed up pretty well. So I can go like that, and now I have a 2-inch half square triangle. Just trim off those little tails. Or I can do it here where I actually rotate it. So here I'm putting the diagonal on my seam, trim, rotate your block, put your square puller back down and line up trimmed edges on the 2s, and then trim whatever's left. So there we have 2 half square triangles that are 2 inches each. Now we need 8 total for our 2 blocks. I wanted to show you another method for making for sewing the diagonal seams. So I'm going to show you a no mark method at the sewing machine. Another method for making half square triangles is to use something like diagonal seam tape. Here I have diagonal seam tape which has 3 lines on it, and this is a product by Cluck Cluck Sew that I think a lot of people are now familiar with. The red one in the middle is lined up with my needle, and then there are 2 black ones on each side of the red. So for this, if I keep the point here lined up on one of the black lines, and I'm going to do the one on the right, that will be my center line. That this way I'm not drawing the diagonal line. Just keep the point lined up. And then rotate it and do the same thing again. Keep the point lined up on the other side. All right, here you can see I sewed. So now I would just cut from point to point with a straight edge. If you're doing a lot of half square triangles, that's a really easy way to do a bunch of them without having to mark that diagonal line. And again, we will press the seam open and square it to 2 inches. So we need to have 8 of these total, so I'm going to go ahead and make all 8. All right, I have them made. Now it's just a matter of squaring them up. And yeah, these I will easily be able to square to 2 inches. Just use 2 sides. All right, now I have my 8. So these lay out in this with the navy going towards the center. And then I have a 2-inch center. Now I just need these light blue pieces here. And I need to sew those to my yellow of the same size. Okay. So I'm going to sew these seams, press them open. All right, seams are pressed open. All of these pieces are 2 inches. And when we sew it together, it will be 5 inches unfinished, 4.5 inches finished. Now, there are ways to make some adjustments to the patchwork and make them uniquely yours. So here, if you wanted to, you could totally turn the half square triangles. That's an option. You can also turn them all the way out. Let's see, so that it's more like a shoe fly look. This, I'm trying to see if we have that somewhere else. We kind of have it a couple places, but not really, because we still have this pieced unit. You can also turn these. So there's many ways to make these blocks uniquely yours. So have fun with it. Go ahead and play with it, as long as it makes a 5-inch unfinished patchwork. You know, have fun making this uniquely yours. So at this stage, I'm going to sew it together, and let me show you that technique. So this is, because it's a small patchwork, what I'm going to do is I'll sew these, and I'll sew this in here, and I will keep my threads all connected. So I'm going to show you this. And this is how we sewed all of our little pieces together. And this will help you line up your seam intersections also. The first time we sew, we'll push our seams to the side, and then the second time we will press seams open. Okay, I'm working with it right here by my machine, and I'm going to just pick it up. Now let's get it laid out. All right, so my first step is to sew these two together first. Put the middle one over on the outside, sew a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, right here, I'm not going to break my threads. And now I'm picking up the middle one and putting it on the outer edge. One, line up those seams. This method also keeps everything in order. As long as you sew it right, it'll stay in order. All right, you saw I turned over the middle one. Okay, didn't break any threads. Okay, now we'll cut our threads. I just pull it down, open up the very top one that you did. Now put on that last part of that row. And then open up your center one and take the last one for that row, position it. And then open the last one. And again, positioning correctly, flip it over. All right, now I'm not going to press yet. I'm just going to decide what these seams are going to press to the, I am going to press them, let's go, so I turned it, and now this one's going to go, it just wants to lay down. This top seam wants to lay down, so that's fine. I'm okay with that. It just means I have to make sure the bottom one flips up, and that way they nest. And then I need to make sure I'm doing the, that they're going opposite direction on this second seam. So I position it first, and you can feel if those seams are nesting. And this is a really good way of getting your seams to nest without having to pin. And that turned out very good. Little pink thread in there we'll get rid of. All right, now do the other side, lay it out, and then just remember you have to check on the back, make sure you're laying that seam the correct direction that you've already selected. So that one goes down, let's see. The bottom one's down or pointing towards me. The top one is away from me. And then I have a seam in there that is pressed open, so I'm making sure that's open. All right, I flipped one of my open seams. I will fix that. But you can see how nicely all those points line up. All right, to fix that one that flipped, I'm just going to clip one stitch because I forgot to check on that when I was sewing. Even though my brain thought about it, I just couldn't make it, you know. So, easier to fix it now. Okay, great. So here, the first rows of stitches I did, I'm going to have those lay down flat because I nested seams. And then the second one I did, I am going to press that seam open. And because I didn't cut those little threads, I need to just snip that little thread loop. So I kind of just do it in one set. And I feel like I could have managed my seams a little better, but I didn't. They're fine. They're fine. I'm being OCD quilter thinking about seams now. It doesn't matter. Just the second set, press them open. The first set, they're pressed to the side. It's a really good way to get really good corners to match, even if you don't pin. All right, so I just need to make a second one of these, and then I have both of my patchwork done for the Churn Dash #1 butterfly. And you can either sew your curves and then stop and sew this, or sew this first and then sew it into your butterfly here. All right, I have both of mine made, and at this stage, I feel like this one is more square than this one. If you will check, this should be 5 inches. And I can just see this one's just a little bit, I don't know, it's probably fine. It'll press, it'll sew in, but this side is obviously a little wonky. So I would just naturally trim up just a teeny bit there. It'll just help it sew in a teeny bit straighter. Okay. All right, that's our first one. Churn Dash, #1 Churn Dash butterfly.